I am back, and you are flying high with me, the Zigzag Man, over the zone in Alameda, California, right across the bay from San Francisco in the northern part of the great state of California. And, you know, I do a lot of these shows week after week after week. Most of my guests, for one reason or another, aren't relatively local. I've got an East Bay gentleman who has been, whether he remembers it or not, has been a guest on these airways on Bob Medeiros' show. Bob Medeiros does a podcast on this network, the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. And I run the network. I heard the show. I befriended this gentleman, and not because he did the show, he's one of the most interesting Renaissance men I've met in my life. He does what he does, and I'm going to introduce you to him now. To you now, his name is Howie Gordon from Berkeley. Howie, what it is?
Hey, I'm in love with the guy. I think he's great. Keep going. Don't stop there.
We're talking about Howie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm actually from Pittsburgh. I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Pirates. But I live in Berkeley for the last 500 years.
Is a good thing. And if you want to talk about the Pirates, all you could talk about is you got to start and end with Roberto Clemente.
That's the truth. Man,
where did you discover Bernie in your passion for baseball, Howie?
I was born 2 blocks from Forbes Field on Coltart Avenue in Pittsburgh. When I was 4 years old, my uncle was an usher there, and at the 7th inning of every home game, they opened the doors so you can just walk in off the street without buying a ticket. And I would go to all the home games and after the 7th inning and see them before kindergarten. Before I was in school, I was in Forbes Field, and lots of wonderful experiences growing up in that neighborhood.
What was your first game? Do you remember your first time?
Yeah, I do remember it because my uncle, who was kind of like a street brawling kind of guy, got into a major fight. It was against the Phillies, and I was 4. My brother was 10. And we were sitting in box seats that were empty, you know. My uncle put us in there, and while we were sitting late in the game, we hear this screaming going on, some tumult, like a little further up in the stands, and you hear somebody yell, "Dirty Jew!" And my uncle, who said, "Excuse me, I'll be back in a few minutes," went up and dove into this melee, which involved 20, 30 adult men. And the players stopped playing on the field and all came over to the fence to watch the fight. And they were pointing at things and laughing and this and that. And my brother and I were scared. It didn't get close to us to be dangerous, but we were kids, and these were grown men fighting, and it was nasty. And my uncle came back with an ear partially bitten and needed to go to the hospital. So he said he showed us another usher who would make sure we got home safe. But that was my first game, so I remember that very well.
And Danny Ainge had nothing to do with that one.
Danny Ainge from the Celtics?
Yeah, he bit a guy's ear in the NBA.
I don't remember Danny doing that. Oh, I did see a good fight between him and Ricky Sobers. No, Ricky Sobers is way before Danny Ainge. Ricky Sobers got into it in the '76 NBA Finals. I was lucky enough to be at that game.
Okay, before I ask you about the Pittsburgh Wrens.
Oh, Connie Hawkins, Bucky Bulliard.
Right, exactly. You got to watch some ABA ball that was, how you say, progressive.
Yeah.
The three-pointer, the ball itself, and some of the best talent that never played up till that point in the NBA.
Yeah,
Roger
Connie Hawkins
Brown,
had a cup of coffee later on in his career.
Yeah. Who did? Connie?
Connie Hawkins.
Yes, not just a cup of coffee. He came, got a few years in where he was productive with Arizona. But by that time, he was kind of a mere shadow of his former self.
Yeah.
And I was lucky enough to grow up in New York, where high school basketball was very, very big.
Yeah.
And Connie got involved in some, I don't remember exactly what it was. If it was point shaving, I think it was talking to people, the wrong people, about college or whatever it was. He was banned from the NBA.
Yeah.
And it led his banning and Roger Brown and some of those guys, Doug Moe. It just led to wonderful basketball that you were privileged enough to see in those days.
Astonishing to me that Pittsburgh has never been able to support an NBA team. It's just that fans just don't turn out for basketball in Pittsburgh. It's shocking. And, we have legendary high schools as well there.
Incredibly loyal football fans.
But that really didn't start until 1970, because the Steelers never won anything from 1933, I think is when the franchise started, until the Immaculate Reception, and that was 72, 71, nothing.
Right, 71 in December, that off with the Raiders. I watched that in Macy's and right before Christmas.
In the early 60s, they had one good season. John Henry Johnson rushed for 1,000 yards. We used to get Detroit players when they were done being good. We got John Henry Johnson and Bobby Lane.
You got Bobby Lane, right?
Bobby Lane was never sober in Pittsburgh. They used to talk about what he smelled like in the huddle. They couldn't listen to him.
Stories about him. He was, or Kenny Stabler was kind of a reincarnate of him. Maybe different drugs of choice or whatever, but they both had the kind of attitude where if they fucked up, they would say, well, high ball drinker, low ball thrower. They were attitudinal, and Bobby Lane was quite a leader.
Well, he and Ed Brown shared the team because Lane was clearly past it, and they had Brown was pretty much equivalent. I mean, in talent at that level, and they had one good year. I think it was 62, where they came to the end of the season and they had a showdown game with the Giants, and the winner was going to go play in the championship, and the loser was going to be in the runner-up bowl. Remember the runner-up bowl? That's where the number 2 team. It was
kind of a consolation game.
Exactly. It lasted about 2 years.
Nobody watched. It was the week either before or after the championship. It might have been.
I think they had it before the All-Star game. It was like a prelude to that. But in any case, in that game, the Steelers got beat by the Giants. They were beating them, too, and Frank Gifford caught a one-handed catch, and that was the game.
Well, I was a New York Giant fan growing up in New York, so
well, you were loving it.
It was free jets.
Gifford used to say the Steelers
as a 10 or 11-year-old, whatever it was. Good memories.
Gifford said of the Steelers of that era, he said the Steelers always had guys on their team that could grow hair through their jerseys, and they'd beat the shit out of us, but we'd always win the game.
That's a good. Who quoted that?
Frank Gifford.
Frank Gifford. Whoa, that's a very interesting quote.
Yeah. I also have another kind of local interest story for you. I think you'll enjoy. My daughter, at age 12, this was about mid-'80s, got involved in the golf program at Lake Chabot, which is run by Raymond Chester. You know Ray Chester?
I know he runs the Alameda golf course.
Lake Chabot. Lake Chabot. I assume we're talking about the same golf course, unless he has another one. But he was managing for the city. I think the city.
He has another one, but that's okay.
All right, so.
And he was a tight end with the Raiders and a good one.
Yeah, with the Raiders and all pro with the Colts before that. And
yes.
So my daughter's in this golf program, and it's a wonderful program. It was 6 weeks long. It met Tuesdays and Thursdays for 3 hours at a time. They did an hour of hands-on professional instruction from an LPGA pro. Then they did a half an hour on the etiquette of golf. Then they served them a free dinner, and then they did another half hour helping them with their homework if they needed it.
Wow.
And I used to do a lot of video freelance stuff, and I helped her teach using video, which was a real useful tool, and it was all volunteer. So at the end of the 6 weeks, they have a tournament and dinner, a fundraising dinner. And my daughter is in a group with Jack Tatum's daughter, and my daughter ends up winning her age group. And they asked me to say a few words at the dinner. Okay, the dinner and the whole program is largely being supported by the Oakland Raiders of the 1970s. That's who's funding all this stuff. And everybody is at this dinner except for John Madden and Ken Stabler. And they asked me to talk because my daughter won her age group, because I'd help with the video and blah, blah. So I'm talking, and it's a great program, yada, yada. And then I said, listen, I have to tell you folks something. I'm from Pittsburgh. Fuck you! Get off the stage! Eat shit, asshole! They just started screaming at me. It was like they didn't care there were kids there or not. I said the magic word. And I said to them, I started laughing. I said, I know, I've hated you guys for so long. You're like family. And I said, if my parents could see me now, they'd make me turn in my terrible towel.
I can give you a good example of how our lives parallel along those lines. In the 70s, I lived in Danville. Danville, California was the home of Big Ben Davidson's bar. It was called Big Ben's. And he's a Jew boy living in Danville.
I had no idea he was a Jew boy.
Danville. Ben is. And I used to go into Ben's bar and befriended him. And he had this mural of a picture, this big, gigantic, blown-up picture of him creaming Joe Namath. And I made it real clear to him that picture.
You were a Jets fan.
Early on, as a Jet fan, that picture really, he says, well, I'll tell you what, his Ben Davidson voice, said, try taking it down if you don't like it and see what happens to you, boy. That's what he says. I said, well, if you can't do anything bad to me, I said, because nobody's going to pay the bar tab that I've accused. There's no way. I'm safe. That's my insurance.
He'll sell your body parts.
Right. Probably, but how much you going to get?
Ben preceded me into porn. He was amazing. He wasn't a major player, but he had a porn with Marilyn Chambers.
As the conversation goes abruptly into porn, you do have a history, among other things, the sports writer thing, the videographer, the parent, which is a different side of you that I had no idea about,
and grandparent.
The parental thing, and the pride you took in your kid, and that's nice. But there is, maybe we could serve this conversation to humanize the sex industry and porn. How did you get into it?
Well, before we go too deep, let's talk about, when you say the sex industry, that's a very large umbrella. A lot of people in the sex industry don't think of porn as part of the sex industry. Hookers don't like porn stars at all. They're ply their trade looking for secrecy and worried about being arrested. They're not looking to be have their faces 10 feet high on screens in the old days with the way it used to be. It also includes therapy. since Masters and Johnson and the Kinsey people came along. There's a big push. Some people within the film community don't want to be called sex workers. They think that that's degrading to them, and that's a whole other. Anyway, the sex industry is very large, and the adult film industry is one part of it.
So
in my life,
it comes down to semantics. It comes down to semantics, basically.
And communities of people.
Right.
There are a lot of people who, for instance, my wife was the first one to get involved in the sex industry. She was trained by Masters and Johnson in sex therapy techniques at the beginning of that revolution, and that was in the very early 70s. And I would be the one.
Did she do actual surrogate work as well?
She actually did. She was an English major and was working for Psychology Today and Careers Today as a writer and an editor, and fell in love with me and moved to Berkeley, was looking for work, and hooked up with some people who were doing the Masters and Johnson therapy. As opposed to, there's a lot of different aspects to talk about. But in any case, she began being the surrogate, and the surrogate and the patient would work with the male and female therapy team. And the four of them would have the meetings and send the couple off to do homework and then come back and talk about the homework. So I would be the one left at home when she would go to work, saying to her, "Have a nice day at work, dear," with my clenched teeth, trying not to be raging and jealous. And in the end, when she'd come back and would tell me stories, it was like the work of angels. It's all I can say. The Sisters of Mercy was a line Leonard Cohen had in the song. That what she was doing, there's a guy, for instance, a guy 40 years old.
And at that point, you took a different view of her going out.
Yes.
And I'm sure, and doing her work, because you realized her work was good, and it was.
It wasn't like she was dating somebody else. It was far from it. But we were doing plenty of that too, because those were the 60s, and the 60s were happening in the 70s for most of us, and
right.
The idea that one could do Romeo and Juliet, have the great love affair with the woman of your dreams, and at the same time do free love, was enormously difficult. And a lot of us found that out the hard way, and we're still wrestling with those monsters of that kind of stuff.
I have my demons from the past in open relationships and an open
tough
marriage,
work.
But
so I didn't get involved into the X-rated industry until years after that.
Yeah. I wouldn't trade the memories and the experiences, and that's all you can do is just move on from whatever it is that one step takes you to another step. And so how did you get involved initially?
Well, I had the fantasy, all the growing right out of the conversation we're talking about now, all these relationships, all this sex is going on, and everybody is plagued with jealousy, and jealous, and I got to the place where I wanted to have sex with a bad girl. I had never been with a bad girl. Everything had been love relationships. I love you, let's fuck. Plenty of fucking going on. But I wanted some of that nippleless bras and crotchless panties and the best drugs and the best oils. And I'd never been with a prostitute. And in high school and college, I'd never been with a bad girl. It'd always been relationships and girlfriends. And I just wanted to have sex as recreation. I wanted some of that stuff. And I thought I would like to meet an X-rated woman, because this is the time X-rated movies had started happening around here. And I had been trained as an actor by the Blake Street Hawkeyes. I don't know if you know that group. That was a local group that did avant-garde theater, founded by John O'Keefe and Bob Ernst and David Shine from Iowa. And Whoopi was part of that group, too, before she was Whoopi. Not before she was Whoopi, but before she got famous as Whoopi. In any case, that was my inciting incident. And because I was on some acting list, one day the phone rings, and it's a phone call from my wife, and the fellow says to her, "How would you like to be in a mad romp through a hospital?" He's casting a film. And she says to him, "Is this a porno film?" And he blah, 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 kind of stumbled, because I learned this later. When they were cold calling looking for women, they didn't like to tell them over the phone it was a porn film that the audition was for, because they found they had better luck if they could actually get the women down to the hotel and then surprise them with what the event was, because they wouldn't come if they knew it was a porn film in advance. So he ended up blowing that and telling my wife, and my wife said, "I'm not interested, but I think my husband might be," and she hands me the phone. And I was interested. As I told you, I wanted to have this kind of experience with these kind of ladies, strippers, hookers, anything that crossed my path that my wife and I could figure out how I could have that experience without hurting us. And this was relatively safe. So this is all pre-AIDS as well. So she arranges. So I arrange. When I talked to the fellow on the phone, he was so guilty for even having called. They weren't looking for men. They were never looking for men. Men are falling out of the rafters to be in these movies. In some cases, men will pay to be in the movies instead of getting paid. So he gives me the information about the audition. And my fantasy was to go to the audition, meet an X-rated lady, have a fling, and go home. I don't know why, but my fantasy involved fucking the woman in the elevator of the hotel where the audition was. I thought that that's where the sex should happen, in the elevator. And I went to an audition, and there's this wonderful picture of my wife dressing me and combing my hair and taking a picture of me to send me off to my audition. Because we had this thing, and I'm sure you heard plenty of this in your time. We talked about our relationship as a union, and our union had benefits for its members. Each member had to raise their hand and say what they wanted. And then if the other person could help them get what they wanted, they would help. And if they couldn't stand it, they would have to say that, whatever. So my wife wanted me to get this experience because I wanted it, and that was good enough. And off I go to the audition. It's in San Francisco, down on the wharf, some hotel there. And I go in, and next thing I know, I'm reading for a part. And I'm doing a cold read. It's a script. It's a ridiculous dialogue. No way that anybody I ever knew ever talked about just gross physical kind of drivel. And I read it, and I'm a good cold read, so that part they liked. And I picked, there's like maybe 15 women there and 15 guys, and I picked the one I wanted, and I had her at the corner of my eye. And then after I'm done reading, they dismissed all the guys. I went, oh shit, okay. So what am I going to do now? So now I'm out in the hallway at the hotel, and I think, well, I'm just going to walk down about 15, 20 paces. And when this woman comes out of the door to get in the elevator, I'll just act like I'm just getting there too. And that's what I do. And it works.
Right.
And we're in the elevator, me and her, and we're going down. Now, my problem was we were already on the second floor. So I've got one floor to make this happen. And I couldn't figure out how to do that. So I just blurted out, do you want to go somewhere and play with me? And she looked at me and said, I knew you were going to ask. And I said, yeah, well, okay, I'm asking. And she said, okay, yeah, why not? And she said, I said, you need a ride? She went, no, I have a car. I said, well, you get in your car, follow me in my car. We'll go back to my place. She lived in the city, and we'll have some time together. Okay, so I do that. And I get to her apartment, and we go inside, and she starts talking. She starts talking, and it's like, okay, enlightenment comes to Howie. There are no X-rated women. There's just costumes and play acting, and she's a person. And the truth is, there's nothing going on between us at all. There's no passion. There's no fire. And she does a little posing.
What we're talking about, you said the word enlightenment, and
yes.
I wish I were enlightened way before I was about what jealousy is. You were talking about that. All jealousy is that you fear your mate or whoever it is you're jealous of is having more fun without you than they would with you, and they don't need you.
Yeah.
And that's all it is. It has nothing.
That's all it is? That's a lot, pal.
Oh, well,
that's a lot.
Pal.
That's why some people shoot each other.
That's all what you think. In other words, if you feel okay with yourself, that there's no one's gonna make this woman feel as good about herself as I can, and I'm secure that in everything, it goes a long way to making it easy and deal with it. Jealousy is the hardest thing. I mentioned off the air that I was involved in the 70s in a double dyad where my then wife and another couple shared our lives together for like 6 years. And it was very immensely challenging because of jealousy. Looking back, that's all it was. And then when I realized what jealousy is, just the fear that they're going to have more fun without you than with you, I wish I'd have known. I don't experience jealousy in the same manner, having been enlightened in that manner.
Well, you've hit a rational place that gives you some peace in dealing with the issue. But for lots of other people, there's an echo about a jealous situation, and it's not rational. It's irrational. It's a feeling, not a meaning. And the feeling is, oh my God, I'm going to die. I can't breathe. It's a feeling that your life is being threatened. Wilhelm Reich, I'm sure you might have used some of his stuff back in those days.
Heard the names, of course.
He explained in The Function of the Orgasm that for some people, when they hit that situation, he talks about how the human being needs its parent, mother, longer than any other animal. And on a biological level, we know that if she abandons us, we're going to die. And that fear of abandonment, he argues, gets projected onto the wife. It goes from the mother to the wife. And some people who are stuck in that game can't differentiate that being left by this woman who is fucking some other guy doesn't mean you're going to die. They have that feeling. They have that fear. That's the echo into their soul, subconscious, what word we want to use. And that's the one that can't be explained away, because that's a feeling. And you have to feel it and discover you won't die. Some people, that's where crimes of passion happen. I mean, there's a long history in the human race of that kind of stuff. And, I'm not spouting what I believe to be cosmic truth in this sense, but the conversation has greater depth to it. And I think there's healthy jealousy, and I think there's irrational jealousy, and I think it is a green-eyed monster.
Right. Well, you got by it. And
yes.
You still.
Yes.
You still survived. And that's another thing that we learn from when we get by an uncomfortable situation. We know it'll be less uncomfortable the next time it comes up because we won't be surprised by it. And that's what makes it easier. Any regrets to any of this?
Regrets? Sure, I've had a few, but then again, too few to mention.
Thank you, Francis.
Yeah. In the big picture, no. I didn't ever, there's a lot of stuff to be said. One of the keys to coping with me or seeing me is that I was raised in a house with a mentally retarded uncle. My mother's younger brother came to live with us when I was 4. And at first he was like having another big brother. I have one other sibling. And then it's like we were the same age. And then I became his big brother. and Izzy was his name. This is so right off of Molly Goldberg. Uncle Izzy. Uncle Izzy was like Buddha. In our house, at the dinner table, if you couldn't say something in 10 seconds, forget about it, because he would say something and we'd all be laughing. He was the center of family life, and he was funny, as well as exasperating and batshit crazy. But it gave me a profound appreciation for the silliness of life. And as I looked around at my family, there was my dad, who managed to own a gas station in the south side of Pittsburgh. And he would be up at like 5 o'clock every morning and home at 6 o'clock at night, sleeping on the couch, working his ass off just to try to hold it together. I had an older brother who never saw a B in his life. He had all A's in everything all the time. He was really an unhappy fellow who was completely driven, ended up at Harvard Medical School. And then there was me. And I looked at the two males, and Izzy was the only one having any fun. So he became a large part of being my model. And he would say things to you like, hey, Al, call me Howie. Hey, Al, I can't say Perry. You say, what? You just said. He said, no, I can't say Perry. It's too hard. I watch Harry Como. I watch Harry Mason. Those would be the kind of conversations you'd have with Izzy every day. When the ketchup would be running low, he would fill the ketchup bottle with water to make more ketchup. And then he couldn't put the lids back on things, so you'd have your French fries on your plate, and you go to put ketchup on it, and you get a plate full of water. That was normal life. And so when you ask me, do I have regrets? No. Porn, I needed something with some panache. The doctor, lawyer, dentist thing wasn't going to work for me. My mother had an expression, if you're normal, I don't want to be. And I've never confused myself for normal.
That's very
I have
funny.
aspects of it. I'm capable of it. But in the end, I go to other places, which are pretty silly. I've taken Goofy as my personal savior.
You cut out a little bit. Would you repeat your last sentence for me?
I said in our house, we've taken Goofy as our personal savior.
Works just as well, by the way.
Yeah, I find that to be true.
It comes back on reruns, which is a lot different than a lot of people's personal saviors that never seem to come back.
Now, I can tell you a great story about Uncle Izzy as it pertains to porn. There was a director in the industry named Sam Weston. He was Jack Weston's younger brother. Jack Weston was a famous character actor for years. He was the younger brother in the same game as his bigger brother and couldn't make a living at it. And so he was directing porn. And he was regarded as the best porn director. He was actually an actor, and he knew what he was doing. He became Anthony Spinelli. And everybody said to me when I was starting out, if you care at all about the acting, you got to meet Anthony Spinelli. You got to meet Anthony Spinelli. Okay, so eventually I do meet Anthony Spinelli. We fall in love with each other. We have a wonderful time. And as we're trading family histories, he finds out that I have an Uncle Izzy. Well, he tells me this story, that he lived on a street where they had a mentally retarded person on the street named Melvin. And the whole street took care of Melvin. It was a love community thing. And he was a special kid, and all these families helped out take care of Melvin. And Sam always wanted to make a movie about a guy like that. So when I came along with the background and all that, he said, now's the time to make this movie. So he comes up with a script called Talk Dirty to Me. And in it, it's a story, it's a buddy picture between John Leslie and myself. Now, I don't know if you know John Leslie, but John Leslie was like one of the heirs to John Holmes. He was like the alpha male of my generation in porn. He was Italian. He was from Pittsburgh also. Green eyes, charm, big dick, swagger. He was what your stereotype of what porn is. And I was not. I was like mentally retarded. And I could play that really well because I'd studied it for 20 years at home.
Right.
And so in the story...
Do you think Izzy might have been studying you too a little bit, just a little bit?
I wouldn't call it studying, but he certainly... he knew I was in the family. He knew not to throw me out in the garbage. I used to chase him around the house till all of a sudden he'd realize he didn't have to run away because I was 4 years old, and then he'd start chasing me. we had a lot of complicated relationships. Anyway, we make this movie, and in it I play not quite retarded because I'd be old enough to have sex. Izzy never was. Maybe his older brothers took him to a whorehouse or something, but that was a tale that never got told to me. So anyway, the movie is about John taking care of me, and there's this climactic scene in the movie where I'm always asking John to get one of his girls to fuck me because girls don't want to be with me. I'm an idiot. They don't like me. And there's a scene we're going to shoot at sundown that's a crying scene in the movie. Now, I have to back up here and tell you this information. A week before we started shooting this movie, we're throwing a dinner party at our Berkeley cottage for the director and John and some other luminaries from the porn world, Annette Haven, Juliet Anderson. They're all over our house for dinner. We're showing off. My wife makes a beef Wellington, and dacquoise is fancy French dessert, and we're buying everything with food stamps. But we make this fancy dinner, and then we're watching John and Annette. John and Annette were both alpha personalities, and when you put them in a room together, it was hysterical because neither one of them would back down, and they would just go at each other, and it's hysterical to watch. So that's going on. At 1 o'clock in the morning, the phone rings. It's my dad calling me from Pittsburgh, which means it's 4 o'clock in the morning in Pittsburgh. And my dad is crying. My Uncle Izzy has just died.
Oh.
Boy, I'm about to play him in a movie in 7 days, and I get this information. And in the meantime, my wife realizes, we've just had a death in the family. She goes in the other room and tells everybody what's happened, and they got to go. Just go. Just leave me be.
Yeah.
It's the first death in my life that touches me, the inner circle of family. And Sam realizes that it's Izzy that's died, and I have a decision to make whether I'm going to go ahead with this movie or not. And he knows that, let me know when you know, because he's in pre-production, and there's a lot of money involved. So, long story short, I decide to make the movie. I can't go home because they're burying him in the morning. In Orthodox Judaism, when you're dead, they're in a hurry to get you underground. I mean, boom, next day.
Yep.
And so there's no plane I can get that's going to get me there in time, and I can't go back for the funeral. And I grieve on my own, and I decide to make the movie as an homage to my uncle, who was just a creature of rare beauty. Okay. So now we're back and we're shooting this movie, and I'm doing this crying scene in the movie. In the crying scene, John is playing his harmonica. We have San Francisco Bay in the background. We're using natural light, which means we only have 10 minutes to get the shot because it's the sunset. And in 10 minutes, the light's going to change, and we're going to lose it. So everything's under the gun. It's a long scene. It's a 5-minute take, which in filmmaking is a long scene. So he's playing his harmonica. I'm kind of leaning on his shoulder, and I'm crying. And I have this long monologue how nobody wants to be with me, and I'm miserable, and blah, 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 blah. And we shoot one. And right after we finish, the cut happens, crew starts applauding. You don't get applause from a porn crew very often. That was pretty amazing. But what was even more amazing was that Sam told them all, shut up. He just turned and gave them a dirty look, and they turned it off like a faucet. He comes up and he puts my head in his hands, and he says, we're going to go again right now. Only this time, just let it out. Okay? And action.
Thought you had been letting it out.
No, this was something else. I knew what he meant. I mean, I was acting is what I was doing. He said, don't act. Just let what you have in there out. And so we're shooting again. And what happens is one of those moments that's a once in a lifetime as far as I know. The lines are coming out of my mouth. The tears are coming out of my eyes. The scene is playing itself on automatic pilot. Inside, I'm looking at a different movie. In my movie, my dead uncle has just stuck his head out from behind the clouds. And he says to me, it's okay. Go ahead. Use it. It's the only time in my life I ever understood acting. And I don't even know if I approve of it. It reminded me, in my college days, I was a history major, and I was very fond of the Middle Ages and the Renaissance era. And when the theater groups, these barnstorming troops, would go from town to town, frequently the church would tar and feather them and send them on their way. Because to the medieval mind, you don't play with life. And that's what acting is. That's what actors do. And that's what that moment was like. And the scene is cut. I look over, Sam smiling. He's happy. He got what he wanted. And the irony is, from there, I have to go to my next scene, which is a sex scene, which is the only one I have in the movie, where this one woman, Sharon Kane is the actress, took pity on me and is going to throw me a mercy fuck. And I'm going to be the happiest I've ever been in my life. So that's what Sam says to me. He says, okay, now we're going to take 5 minutes, catch your breath, wipe your eyes. Now you're going to go be as happy as you've ever been in your life. And then he screams, you hit the peaks with Anthony Spinelli! Okay, so that movie comes out. Oh, and before it comes out, I have to take it back one more step. They get the movie to rough cut. I don't know if you speak film, but everything's in the movie except the music, and it's not quite finished, but you can see it. You see what the movie is going to be. Right. And they're playing the rough cut for the people who own the movie. Who owns the movie? Vinny and Ani from Jersey. Vinny and Ani owned the movie, okay? So Sam is showing the movie to Vinny and Ani. And they say, when they see this movie, Sam, fucking kids crying, Sam. What the fuck's this shit? There ain't no crying in porn. Get this shit out. I don't want any fucking crying scenes in this movie. What's wrong with you? Get this shit out of the movie. Sam is explaining this is the climactic scene in the arc of the story. They go, get this fucking shit out of the movie. It's their movie. They own it. They cut the scene out of the movie. Sam and them can't be in the same room again. They had a 3-picture deal going in. That was over. The movie comes out without that scene in it, but it's still got such a clean spirit. The movie becomes a huge hit in the porn world. It's not Deep Throat by any means. That was the one and only. But in the porn world of that year, it won everything there was to win. I got a Best Supporting Actor award in New York and another one out here. Those were the two centers of porn production. John Leslie, it turned him from a star into a megastar. And it put me on the map of playing with the big boys. It made my career. In fact, when I was signing my model release for that movie, my name had been Dewey Alexander. And Dewey came from Huey, Dewey, and Louie, Donald Duck's nephews.
Donald Duck's, right.
And Alexander the Great came from Alexander the Great, a man who needed no introduction. And right. Sam said to me at signing the model release, he said, kid, you did a great job in this movie, but I'll tell you what. I don't want any fucking Dewey Alexanders in my movie. Pick a new name. And I turned to his son who had written the script, and I said, what's my name? And he looks me up and down, and he goes, Richard Pacheco. And he's nodding his head like he's standing on the corner taking reds. And that's how I got my name. Because after that, the phone started ringing for Richard Pacheco. They wanted to hire me to be in their movies. I was lucky enough to come along in a rare period of time, lasted about 7 or 8 years, really, where the powers that be thought that if they would make real movies that had real sex in them, they could compete with Hollywood. Because Hollywood couldn't cross a certain line as far as the sexuality goes. We could. Where we were falling down was that nobody could act. It was all just sex performers. They weren't even actors. They called them models. So while I was having horrible times doing sex scenes, I could not keep my dick hard to save my soul. I was really bad at it in the beginning.
That's
eventually,
what's gone through my mind. Never having been in the industry, never having known anybody on this level, we're conversing. how does one, I'm 71 years old, so you go through a lifetime of trying to keep your dick hard.
Well, here is the magic moment I've waited for in this whole conversation with you, because the answer is baseball. This is where we totally cross-pollinate. When I had done 4 or 5 movies and had only gotten hard twice out of about 10 scenes, I started, first of all, having to admit I got a problem. Because what do you call a porn star who can't get a hard on? The answer is an actor.
Yeah.
The answer is it's like trying to be a hockey player who doesn't know how to skate. So what did I do? I went back to my Little League days, where when I was trying to learn how to hit, I started keeping a box score. And in the box score, when I was in Little League, is it a lefty, is it a righty? Is he throwing heat, is he throwing junk? What kind of bat am I using? Every factor that I thought of when I was coming to the plate, I converted to porn language. So my box score in porn came out, does the woman like me or not? Is she taller than me or not? What position are they asking me to come in? For instance, I do terrible if I try to fuck somebody standing up. It's really hard for me to stay hard. If I try to come from a blowjob, and I'm 30 years old at the time, it's going to take about a week. If I'm on a movie set, it's going to take about a month. So don't go promising blowjobs, not unless somebody's going to suck your dick for hours of foreplay in advance, and that doesn't happen in this business. And so I kept my my box sheet. I'm looking right at it here. There, in the end, there was like 110, 150 sex scenes that I went through. And I kept, even after I learned how to do it, I kept keeping it for just the funniness of it to myself.
Right.
So the box score was 1, the cum shot box score.
Incredible how our careers differ. I used baseball to keep from coming. In other words, what I would think of, I'm in the middle of some, I think, well, who played second base for the Reds in 1959? That must have been
Roy
Johnny
McMillan.
Temple.
No, he was shortstop. Who was second? Johnny Temple.
Johnny Temple, yes, absolutely. And Roy McMillan, the shortstop.
Don Hope, third base. He got traded first.
And pretty
Big Clue. I wanted to be Big Clue so bad. I used to wear shirts like that.
Cut off at the sleeves.
And he was also the only guy that I ever saw in that era who had, instead of the handle of the bat being like a knob, he didn't make the knob out of it. He just had it like a cone-ish kind of thing, a cylinder, not like a cylinder. It was a tapered thing. Well, it was curved. It was before they put the knob in, the bat would have looked like. It was just sort of rounded, like a nose cone.
A Ty Cobb kind of bat.
Yeah, I had one of those bats. I actually went out and got it. And I got a bat that was too heavy for me, so I could get stronger and be like Ted Kluszewski. The Pirates got him for about 20 minutes at the end of his career.
Well, were you at least like Gene Freeze, who played third for
Augie, we called him. Augie, yeah.
Wow.
And George Freeze, he had a twin brother. He made the show for about another 5-minute deal.
Right. And we'll go to the Cardinals, and we'll go Dick Groat at shortstop, and we could...
Yeah. Boy, it's hard to see him go. But Dick Groat was a shocker because when he would take shortstop, he'd take off his hat for the national anthem, and he was bald as a cue ball.
Right.
And that was a shock to see a young man bald like that. We didn't see a lot of that.
As my partner on a lot of these baseball podcasts and sports podcasts, Al Blumkin, would tell you that, or remind you that Dick Groat was a pro basketball player before he became a baseball
Well, I knew
player.
he was an All-American. Did he actually play in the NBA?
Played a little in the NBA before it was the NBA, if I'm not mistaken. It was the NBL or something. And he went to Duke. He was a terrific basketball player.
Yeah, he was All-American. That I knew.
Branch Rickey signed him. Man, all those teams you root for, all those teams, those years, that you root for with the Pirates doing great, you could thank Branch Rickey. He brought Clemente to the organization, stole him from the Dodgers when after the Dodgers dumped him, O'Malley dumped Branch Rickey, and he built that Pirate team.
And he also said that one of the greatest quotes of all time to Ralph Kiner. Do you know that story? Ralph Kiner hit whatever it was, 50 home runs one year and wanted a raise. and Branch Rickey said,
"Oh, we finished last with you. We'll finish last without you."
There you go. There you go. Which I thought was one of the greatest things I ever heard.
Malaprop. Ralph Kiner did the Mets warm-up show for years and years. He's an icon in New York. He had incredible malprops, none of which I can think of right off the top of my head right now. But a nice warm. Married a swimmer, married an athlete, Esther Williams or some famous.
No, she was married to Fernando Lamas.
You're right about that. You're right about that, man. You're absolutely right about that one, my friend.
You look marvelous.
You look extra, even on the radio, you look marvelous. I can't see your face, but I know you are something else. That's what made you the non-coming, or coming, if you will, porn star that you are.
Oh, that's another another baseball similarity to porn is that stunt cocks were like relief pitchers who would come in on a failed dick and get a save. Because when I couldn't get it hard, they'd make me take off my costume and give it to the stunt cock, and then you'd get a close-up of his dick and him coming, and it would look like it was my dick. In fact,
everybody out there, we're learning the insides, if you will, about the porn industry. And the guest is Howie Gordon, who I think will be back on these microphones on a regular basis. Because if you enjoyed this half as much as I did, we have a lot to talk about in life. And I think this was a terrific episode. Come back again, and you're on the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. I'm going to close the show the way I generally do. I'm going to implore you and the entire audience to keep your dreams wet, keep your humor dry, keep your kids out of military recruiting offices, and off the laps of clerics that wear dresses. If you do all four of those things, you really can't miss in life. It'll help you a lot. You don't have to. I don't really give a flying fig if you do or not. Not you. I care about you, Howie. But the audience, I don't even know who you are. Let me know who you are. Talk to me on Facebook. Tell me you enjoy it.
Buy a copy of my book.
Tell me about your book.
HindsightBook.com. www.hindsightbook.com. It's called Hindsight. It reads just like the conversation you've been listening to. In fact, a lot of those stories you'll find in the book. 400 pages, too.
Nice.
Yeah.
Look for
Actually,
that,
697 pages. I meant to say 400 photographs.
690 pages. That's a fuck of a big book.
Yeah, well, it was a mistake. I learned that the hard way. Because when you have something that long, they charge you more money to print it.
That size, is there anything after you were done writing the book and it went to press and this, that, and the other thing, anything you wish you would have put in that you forgot to put in? And
no, I had to trim it down from like 1,200 to get it out there. But I wrote the book I wanted to write. You know, it maybe you want to do this another time because can I be brief about this?
No, I want to listen to you for a few more minutes because
all right. Well, then, I was retired for a long time. I've been trying to get my book published for 30 years. It took me 30 years to find a publisher, and I would write book proposals and send them off to publishers. And I mean, I got enough rejections to wallpaper a large house. So my kids came after my career was sent. They were born right at the end of my career and knew nothing about those years. And by the time they were adults, they had accepted that I had been in that business, and we were still married. The same moon I went to, their mother was and I were still together, so they tried to make sense of the stereotypes of who a porn star is, knowing that I was one, and it didn't add up, because they knew me to be someone that they liked and loved, and a father and a husband, and the guy that made them eat their greens and do their homework. It didn't sound like Joe Porn to them, what the world was telling them a porn star was. So I wanted them, and plus, how did mother put up with you? How did that work? How could you do that? I mean, what the fuck? Because now they're in relationships and they're finding out how all the jealousy things work, and it seems very strange that could be. And did I make her do that? Am I the bad guy? And somehow I have her under Svengali spell or some shit. I wanted to tell the story of what that business was for myself and what that business was for my wife and I. In many ways, just being in the business for me was sexual healing. I had the largest breasts in the 7th grade. I was Smokey Burgess. I had no idea what was I doing with tits. And I was the last person in the entire grade to go through puberty. So everybody else had hair on their dick before me, and I had fat hiding my dick. I was just so scarred. I think of it as like a spring. If you push down a spring, push it down, push it down, push it down, with sexual fear and sexual anxiety, when you let go of that spring, it's going to shoot, way past normal just to get back to even. And that's what being a porn star was like for me. I had to just heal. I had to make myself a sexual Superman just to be normal again. Because I was starting from a very deep hole. And that's what I did. It really... I went through, you haven't lived until there's 50 people waiting for you to get a hard on, and you're failing. There's not a rock you can crawl under that's big enough. The humiliation I put myself through is astonishing, because most guys in the business who get a taste of that don't come back for a second helping. But I was committed. I wanted to be successful at this. And it's odd where you choose to fight your battles in life. But I did. In fact, there's a wonderful quote. Where is that one? In my book, when I first did the box score, it's a chapter called Talk Baseball to Me. And I introduce it with this expression. Excellence is never a trivial pursuit, no matter how bizarre the medium for it. And that was from Simon Barnes, who was a sports writer for the London Times.
Whoa.
So let me end there on that high note.
That is.
And I'm happy to talk more with you down the road somewhere.
Thank you, Howie. I really appreciate it. For me, it was fun, and that's what it's all about.
Amen.
And if you enjoyed yourself half as much as I did and am, you'll be back again. Thank you, Howie.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Be well. Adios, everybody. Catch you down the road.